Hello, the previous video in this sequence looked at, in a talking really quick, Gospel of Mark and Gospel of Matthew introduction. Gospel of Mark is the Reader's Digest version of Jesus. It's better than that, but it's a very quick, hit the ground running, baptism, boom, 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 immediately, and then death and resurrection. 16 chapters. You can read it, I think, in an hour and a half, if you have a good version. Mark, shortest gospel. Matthew, most Jewish gospel. And of course, since Jesus was a Jew, there are some arguments that could be made that in Matthew, we may get a slightly more authentic flavor. Authentic's not the right word. The right flavor if you were on the countryside in some respects, because Jesus was a Jew. And Mark and Luke, and I would say John, de-Jewify Jesus a little bit. That sounds bad, but you know what I'm saying. They gentilify Jesus a little bit in Matthew, in Mark, Luke, and yes, even in John. Even though John is, or whoever he is, the beloved disciple, perhaps it's John, the son of Zebedee, or perhaps another John. We'll see when we get there. In its current form, it's probably been gentified a little bit, not defiled, but gentified a little bit. That's all visions of things to come. But Matthew is the most Jewish gospel. And I want to talk in this video about the Sermon on the Mount. This is Matthew 5 through 7. It is, I would say, the best encapsulation of Jesus' ethical teaching, his earthly teaching. Now, it doesn't have stuff on the end times or on, so there was other teaching that Jesus did that's very important. But the Sermon on the Mount kind of gives us a great picture of Jesus' ethical teaching. By ethics, I mean, how should we live in this world? How should we go about being in the world? And so the Sermon on the Mount is very important. It's ground zero for Jesus' earthly teaching. So the Sermon on the Mount. Let me give you an overview of it. It starts with some blesseds. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are they who mourn. It starts with the blesseds, also called the Beatitudes. Why don't we just look at the Beatitudes real quick while we're here? So here they are, using the New Revised Standard Version. Here's the intro to the sermon. He went up in the mountain, Moses, and then he said, blessed are the poor in spirit. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they who mourn. Blessed are those who are meek, those who aren't pushy, who don't push themselves. They're not personally ambitious, cutthroat. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the merciful, the pure in heart, the peacemakers, those who are persecuted. Now, these don't seem to be people who are particularly blessed. By the way, what does blessed mean? Happy isn't quite strong enough. Happy is kind of, that makes sense in my worldview, but they were an honor-shame culture. So blessing has a sense of honor. It's good, obviously, it's positive. It's like God has shown his favor upon me. God shows favor on the poor in spirit. What's a poor in spirit? Well, a poor is somebody who doesn't have enough stuff or doesn't have enough resources to live. And by the way, Luke's version of this in Luke 6 is just blessed are the poor, period, and woe to the rich, period. But that's another story. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Matthew's the spiritual version of it. But clearly there is a reversal between worldly values and kingdom values. In the world, are those who cry, those who mourn, those who lament, are they blessed in this world? No, not in this world. Are peacemakers blessed in this world? Man, if you try to make peace between two people who want to fight, you're likely to get hurt. What about the merciful? Oh, you're so merciful. Not in the ancient world, merciful people weren't, people who get their justice. I'm going to get justice. This person's going to get what's coming to them. Worldly values. Those who are ambitious get ahead in life, not the meek. And so those who are persecuted, honored. This is our annual honoring of the persecuted. How many dinners are like that? So these are topsy-turvy from worldly values. Worldly values and kingdom values are different. These are the values of the kingdom. But anyway, these are the blesseds, the Beatitudes, the blesseds, and they kick off the Sermon on the Mount. So the Sermon on the Mount begins with Beatitudes, the blesseds. And then the rest of chapter 5 is about what I'm going to call fulfilling the law. Hold that thought, because I'm going to come back. And to me, Matthew 5 is so helpful in understanding how Christian ethics works. I think we really get to the heart of Christian ethics in Matthew 5:17 through 48. So hold that thought. But then Jesus goes on to talk about what superior righteousness looks like. And we'll get to this also in a moment. Let's just say it's not what the Pharisees are doing. In my Matthew video, the one right before this in the series, I quoted the verse where Jesus says, unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you won't enter the kingdom of heaven. And they would have gone, what? I can't be as righteous as the Pharisees. They are so righteous. They tithe their mint, to give it to the temple. I can't be that righteous. I can't possibly do it. But good news is that Jesus is not talking about doing more. Doing more is not being more righteous than the Pharisees. It's doing righteousness the right way. And by the way, they thought the Pharisees were really great. They didn't think, oh, Pharisees are obviously evil hypocrites. I mean, our picture of a Pharisee, if you've ever heard of the Pharisee, is they're not fair, you see. They've got this big sinister mustache. I'll get you, my pretty. I'm mixing movies there. But anyway, so they wouldn't have gotten that the Pharisees weren't necessarily as righteous as they were putting on. And so we're going to see when we get to chapter 6 what superior righteousness looks like. And it kind of ends then with the wise man builds his house upon the rock. Basically, if you're wise, you will do these things that I've told you. That's building your house upon the rock. So this is an outline of the Sermon on the Mount. So let's dig into this. What does it mean to fulfill the law? So the key verses of the Sermon on the Mount, I think, are Matthew 5:17 through 20. And it's good enough for us to stop and look at them, I think. So here are the verses that I think are the key verses of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus says, do not think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I've not come to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly, I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. It's jot and tittle. A jot is like a little iota that can be a little subscript that hangs below a letter. And then a tittle is like a little hanging over piece of a Hebrew letter. By the way, these are actually quite significant in Greek and Hebrew. They do make the difference between one letter and another, or one form and another, interestingly enough. But now, I grew up thinking that this paragraph was saying, you have to keep every last bit of the Jewish law, like don't trim the edges of your beard. So if you have a mustache, Jesus is against you, and these sorts of things. If you have clothing of mixed thread, Jesus is against you. But I don't actually think that's what Jesus is saying. But let me read the rest of it. Verse 19, therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments, teaches others to do the same, will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Again, remember that, of course, the Gospel of Matthew is for Jews, and Jesus would have been speaking to Jews. However, when we get to the rest of the chapter, we find out exactly what Jesus is talking about here. And then here's the verse, for I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds, that's the scribes and Pharisees, you won't enter the kingdom of heaven. Okay, so this is the key paragraph, I think, of the Sermon on the Mount. Hold that thought, because I'm going to show you now why I think this is not exactly what I grew up thinking it was. And since I'm here, let me go ahead and do the first one. We have a number of contrasts here. You have heard, but I say to you. You have heard, but I say to you. So here's the first one. You have heard, do not murder. But I say, don't even be angry. Okay? Come to terms quickly with your accuser and so forth. Okay? So hold that thought. Let me go back to my PowerPoint. It would be easy from the first two, especially, and even the third one here. It'd be very easy to think that Jesus is going harder. He's saying, you've heard, do this, but I'm saying do this. I don't think that's quite right either here. It's not, you've heard, just keep this much of the law, but I'm saying keep all of the law. Or you've heard it said, don't murder, but I'm saying don't murder and don't hate. I think that's an easy impression to get at first, but when we dig in deeper, especially when we go a little bit further, we find that it's not so much that Jesus is saying do more. He is reorienting. He's reorienting things away from externals and toward internals. We'll see this especially when we talk about what true righteousness is. Jesus in Matthew 6 reorients true righteousness away from external things that we do to internal things that we have attitudes. So when Jesus says, you've heard it said, don't murder, but I say don't hate, he's saying it's not just about the act of murder, which is bad. Of course, Jesus doesn't want you to do that either. But you've already murdered in your heart when you hate someone. And I also want to qualify here that 21st century Western individualists are very hyper introspective. We're very good at looking at ourselves. I call it navel gazing. When I was in college and I was trying to ask girls out and things like that, if I had a conversation with someone of the opposite sex, I would then go through it in slow motion. How are you today? I'm fine. And then, okay, she said, I'm fine. What's that mean? Does that mean she likes me? I'm fine, or I'm fine, go away? What does that mean? How many seconds did it take her to respond? Did she think about it? Did she look back? I mean, we are just a hyper introspective culture. At least a lot of Western individualism is hyper introspective. Not everyone in my world is that way. Not everybody is as sick as I am, but I think they would have had I think that would be completely foreign to most ancient peoples who lived most of their lives outside their heads. They were not high. We are in a romanticism, 1800s Europe. We live in a post-romantic era. We have the Hallmark Channel. They did not have the Hallmark Channel. And so I think we are way more introspective than they would have been. And so, when we talk about, what is hate or what is lust, so same thing with adultery. It's not just about having the affair. It's about fantasizing about it, about dreaming of it, of trying to find an opportunity to be alone with the other person. You know what I mean? It's not just a passing thought is part of what I'm getting at here. My grandfather had a saying, I'm sure he got it from somewhere else. You can't keep a bird from flying over your head, but you can keep it from making a nest in your hair. We're talking here about making nests in your hair. It's not just a matter, I hate that person. It's not just a passing thought. It's like, man, wouldn't it be great if my car accidentally ran over? I mean, it's beyond just a passing thought, or even just the feeling. There's an element of intentionality or fantasizing, I think, involved here in what Jesus is talking about here. So murder, it's not just about murder, but it's about the attitude that leads to murder. It's not just about the act of adultery, but it's the heart that leads to adultery. And I would say that where divorce fits in here is because divorce is, in what Jesus is talking about here, legalized adultery. It's like, I'm going to get another woman by legally divorcing my wife. And I don't think that a lot of times people take the divorce teaching of the New Testament and treat it as if it's the one bit of legalism in the things that Jesus taught. It doesn't fit Jesus at all the way some people talk about divorce. I think if we read the teaching on divorce carefully in Matthew and other places, Jesus is protecting primarily the woman, because it's primarily going to be the woman. I mean, women can't divorce men in Palestine by and large, unless you're really, really rich, and then you can go home to dad or whatever. In general, divorce in Palestine was a matter of a man divorcing a woman, overwhelmingly, maybe almost exclusively, but definitely overwhelmingly. And I realize that objections can be made to what I'm saying, but this is what I believe, that Jesus is primarily talking about men who throw away their wives for another woman, in much the way that the book of Malachi talks about it. And so divorce in that sense is legalized adultery. And it fits, right? Because it's about your heart. And so the person who commits adultery when they're still married, or the person who gets divorced so they can do it legally, has the same wrong heart toward their spouse. And so the reorienting here is the love principle. In Matthew 22, when Jesus is asked, what is the greatest commandment? He says, love God and love your neighbor. On this lay all the law and the prophets. In fact, the Sermon on the Mount says that in chapter 7, verse 12, I think it is. Do whatever you would have people do to you, do that to others. It's the golden rule. That is the law and the prophets, Jesus says. And so when we get to oaths, there is the third commandment. Remember the third commandment by Protestant reckoning? Don't take the name of the Lord in vain. If you make an oath, you better keep it. What does Jesus say here in Matthew 5? He says, don't make oaths at all. So it's not where he says, make even more oaths. You see what I mean? He's not adding anything here. He's getting to the heart of the matter. And the heart of the matter is that if you're a truthful person, you don't have to swear. If everybody knows, oh, that person always tells the truth, then you don't have to say, I swear I didn't take it. You don't have to say that, because everybody will know, well, he said he didn't take it. And we know that that person is very honest. And so, again, if you're loving, you're going to tell the truth, because people who love others tell the truth to others, and not in a kind of, oh, that dress is awful. That's not what I mean, but in a real, a truth that's a loving truth. And so fulfilling the law here is not keeping the letter of the law. Fulfilling the law here is keeping the heart of the law, and the heart of the law is love. We see this especially in the climax of chapter 5 at the end. There are two paragraphs here. One is, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. You've heard it said, you took a test over it. It's the law of retribution, the lex talionis, the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth law. Jesus says, don't do this. He actually contradicts the letter of the Old Testament. Now, I don't think he necessarily contradicts the heart of the Old Testament. We've talked about how the law of retribution was actually merciful, probably originally, because it told you not to take two eyes for one eye. But also, the law of the Old Testament, or the law of retribution, is more governmental, perhaps, rather than personal, not so much about individual interaction. But Jesus says, don't do this, because if you love your neighbor, you're not going to want revenge, or you're not going to insist on revenge if you love your neighbor. And of course, the last paragraph is worth, I think, looking at here real quick. You've heard it said, love your neighbor, but hate your enemy. It doesn't say that. But I say to you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He makes the sun rise not just on good people, but the Lord lets the sun rise on evil people too. He sends rain not just on righteous people, but on unrighteous people too. By the way, for a long time, I thought, he sends rain on the just and the unjust. He allows bad things to happen to good people, because rain, go away, please come back another day. And then one day it dawned on me, wait a minute, rain is really good if you're a farmer in an agricultural world where there is a lot of drought. So anyway, rain is a good thing here. Sun is a good thing, rain is a good thing. And God doesn't just rain on the good farmers. God gives rain to bad farmers too. God loves his enemies. Verse 46, if you only love those who love you, what good is that? I mean, bad people do that. If you only greet your brothers and sisters, you're just like everybody else. Go the whole way, be complete, like your heavenly Father is complete. And not only love your friends, but love your enemies as well. And that is, what does it mean to fulfill the law and the prophets? Love fulfills the law and the prophets. Love is the attitude. And so once again, we find that the love commandment, love God, love neighbor, encapsulates all of the ethical requirements that God has for humanity and his people. So Matthew 5 is very, very, I think, key to understanding Jesus. I think there are a lot of Christians who don't really understand Jesus. They use Jesus as basically an excuse to do the things that they want to do. And that includes see the wicked punished, and vengeance and these kinds of things, justice. But really the essence of Jesus' ethical teaching is not only to love people in the church, not just to love people who it's convenient to love, but to love the people that are hard to love. And we'll see this, of course, in the parable of the Good Samaritan when we get to the Gospel of Luke. Well, there are other great lessons in the Sermon on the Mount. Don't show off your spirituality, because your spirituality should be, again, from the heart, not external, but oriented around the heart. So the Pharisees, oh, I've been fasting. It's been so hard. Can't you see? They show off their spirituality. Now, everybody looking. Yes, I'm going to give $1,000 to this poor person. So the Pharisees they did it for show, to show off their spirituality. And Jesus says, Your true spirituality is a matter of the heart. Of course, the Lord's Prayer is in the Sermon on the Mount in chapter 6. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses. We forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the glory, and forever. Pardon. Anyway, Lord's Prayer is there. He teaches his disciples how to pray. Don't worry. He says, again, this is about not looking at what is seen, external, but looking at what is unseen. And so don't worry about what you're going to eat or what you're going to drink or how you're going to be clothed. I realize it's easier said than done. But remember, if you're looking at what's unseen, you know that God will take care of you. You can't change things most of the time anyway. Kind of like there have been times where I've been a little bit afraid of flying, but what can I do to change? There's nothing I can do to change whether the plane flies or not. Why worry? And that's what Jesus says. He says, you can't change your hair color. Well, now you can. But back then you couldn't. You can't change your hair by worrying about it. And so, actually, if you worry about it, it'll probably go gray sooner. But you need to orient yourself around what is not seen, the heavenly, rather than around what is seen. And your heavenly Father, from whom every good gift comes, rather than the earthly people. Chapter 7, don't judge. You're going to be judged the way you judge other people. Kind of project. You may have heard of projection in psychology. Projection is where you see your faults in other people, but don't see them in yourself. You've got a log in your eye, but you see the speck in somebody else's eye. Never did quite get that illustration, which says to me it's an ancient thing. It's just not the way we think about eyes, I think. But judge not, plank eyes. Ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and ye shall find. Knock and the door will be opened unto you. Again, God wants to give good gifts, so you don't have to worry about what you can see, because God, whom we can't see, will take care of you. God will take care of you. And I've already mentioned the golden rule. Whatever you would have other people do to you, do to them. For this is the law and the prophets. Oh, great stuff. Sermon on the Mount, read it. Matthew 5-7, the essence of Jesus' ethical teaching for us as we live here on earth these days before his return.